Hey everyone, this is Stanford again with another tutorial. This one's going to be related to painting. We're going to be creating a value scale so you can understand how to create darks and lights in painting. It's a lot different than a pencil. You can't just go darker or lighter with paint. You have to actually change the color by adding black or white to it. So on this side of our value scale we have tints. These are colors with white added. On this side of the value scale are shades. These are colors with black added. On some of this other section of the paper, we're going to just make a couple sections so we can do different painting techniques. This is just mark making techniques with lines, and this is basic stippling techniques. And I'll teach you how to paint a nice, solid, crisp, clean edge. All right, so we're going to be doing this on watercolor paper. I've already started creating a value scale, so this is what I've got done so far. How I did this is I've taken my ruler and measured 1 inch on this edge here to get this line, 1 inch on the top and bottom to get a little bit of a border there, and then from here to here it is 3 inches wide, and then all of these measurements from the top to the bottom of the value scale are 1 inch increments. So what you want to do is draw your edges first and then mark every inch all the way down and then crisscross your dots here to create a nice clean value scale. So you probably couldn't see that bottom edge. There's an inch there, inch here, and then these are 3 inches across again. All right, so we'll go ahead and make that. You will make that, and then I'll begin painting. On this section of our watercolor paper, you can see it's empty right now, but we're going to be doing those different sections of painting techniques in here. So leave that blank for now, and then I'll pause for a second, load up my palette. I'll show you what that looks like, and then you guys can do that as well. Okay, I'm back with my loaded palette. So I have a round palette. You can buy these at Michael's for under $2. If you're in my class, I have them to give out to you. What I've done here is I just have 3 colors. I have white, which is almost full. I have blue, which is about halfway full. And then I have a little bit of black. To make this value scale, you need 1 color plus black and white. And keep a little bit of space so we can make other values in your value scale or in your palette here. What I am using is tempera paint. My students should be using gouache, which is an opaque watercolor. Tempera is similar. It dries to a chalky matte finish, same as opaque watercolor or gouache. They're both water-based, so you're going to have a bucket of water handy. I've got one right here. And when you go to paint, have some paper towels handy and your brush, set of brushes as well. We won't be using all of them, but we'll be using a couple different ones here. Okay, so I guess we can just get started with painting. I'm going to use my little bit larger rounded brush. Some of these sections are big open areas. If you want to use a flat brush on the inside of those, you can. But this one does a pretty good job with being able to get those edges nice and crisp. And we might switch to some smaller brushes when we do those other techniques out there. All right. So what you want to do is get your white and black at the 2 ends of the value scale. So let's see, I'm going to put white up here. Now also when you paint, if you're a beginner painter, learning craftsmanship is key to being successful in painting. So what you want to do is not overload your brush, and also you want to be able to control the paint that is on your brush, because that's when it becomes a big mess. So wet your brush a little bit and then wipe it off. You don't want it dripping with water, but you want it slick so that paint releases when you go to apply it to something. I'm going to just dip it into my white paint. Now I don't want to get my paintbrush, I don't want paint all over it. I just want it on the bottom half of my bristles. Once it starts getting up here, then it's going to be hard to control and it's going to be a big mess. So half of the battle in painting is just controlling the amount of paint you use and trying to create a nice, crisp, clean edge. Once you do that, the rest is pretty easy. All right, so I'm just gonna dip it in about that much. I'm gonna tap it off so I don't have a big blob that I can't control on there. It's probably gonna be okay in the center section if I put a big blob in there, but not on those edges. So I'm just gonna practice, dipping it off a little bit. Now I'm using my rounded brush. If you paint, straight forward to the edge and not drag it along the edge like that, you'll have more control over those bristles. So what I'm going to do is just kind of start inside, and then I'm going to push my bristles close to that edge. And when I feel my paintbrush is running out of paint, I'm going to pull it away. It's going to be a little bit hard for you guys to see that white paint, but as we get into those other colors, you'll see it a little bit better. So that's why I want you to treat those edges, dip it in, wipe it off, and push the tip of the brush to the edges, pull it away. And you'll see if you start running out of paint, you'll have less control. The bristles will spread apart and you won't have as much control. So keep it loaded, but not overloaded. All right, and so you just want to kind of go around those edges like that. Push the brush, tip bristles to the edges, pull it away. Move your paper around versus trying to contort your hand into different areas. And so I'm just going to kind of paint those edges. I got a little bit of a blob there, but this is just practice. It'll be all right. And we'll just kind of fill in this section here. Now, this paint should dry pretty flat on the inside, so you can just get it on there and spread it out. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It won't show your flaws. Okay, there is my white square, rectangle. I'm gonna go down and paint this black one. Before I get into my black paint, I want to make sure my brush is clean. I don't want any gray on this at all. It's either going to be blue with black or white with black, and I want to mix them together because then it gets gray and you lose the purity of your color. So make sure you do a nice job of not contaminating the two different values together. Clean off your brush. All right, I'm going to dip into my black paint here. Same thing. I just want a little bit on the edge. I don't want paint all up in here. I'm gonna wipe off that big blob that I've got on there. Now I'm just gonna take my brush, aim it towards the edge that I want to go to, and I'm going to wind up on that edge so I get a nice crisp edge that way. Pull it away when I start getting shaky or my hand is, I'm running out of paint. Reload. Push it to the edge, pull it away. You can do whatever you want on the inside here, it doesn't matter. Remember to turn your paper to fit your hand, not your hand to fit your paper, or whatever surface you're painting on. If you want to use a flat brush in that center section, that'd be a good brush to use to fill up big areas. You don't want a super tiny brush on a large area. You don't want a super large brush on a small area. So think about what brush you're going to use to fit the section you're painting. And when you go back in to do details, we'll do some really tiny brush work later on. Okay, so I've got black and white at each ends. I'm going to put my pure blue right here because it's kind of on the darker side of the spectrum, so I'll have more tints than shades with my blue. Let me wipe off this brush. And we'll get into the pure blue right here. You could use whatever color you want in between. If you're using the yellow, it's going to be closer to your white. You'll have less tints, more shades. If you're using red, it's going to be a little bit more in the center. All right, there's my blue. I'm going to tap it off there. Start a little bit away from your edge and then push it to your edge. You can see that I'm running out of paint. I have a little less control. You can see that right there, right? So reload. Push that brush to the edge. Pull it away. Probably needed a little more water. It wasn't getting off there quite as smoothly as it should. Or maybe it needed more paint. So you're going to kind of have to figure out how much paint to use, and as you are painting, you will learn that. And be careful, I just got a blob right there. We want to try to keep our paper clean. We don't want paint all over the place. If you're working with tempera or gouache, I can come back later on and pick that paint off with an X-Acto blade. Should go away. And the other cool thing about tempera or gouache is you can work with it a little bit after it dries on your paper or canvas, whatever you're working on. It's water-based. This stuff will also dry in your palette, and then you can re-wet it and keep using it. So it's a great forgiving beginning paint. Later on, we'll get into acrylic, and you'll see that that is less forgiving. It dries very quickly, so you don't have much time to work with it. And it dries to a hard plastic, so once it's dry, you can't manipulate it. You just have to paint over it. But I do like using acrylic for larger projects, gouache or tempera for smaller projects, and then watercolor for more transparent type work. But concentrate on craftsmanship, nice clean neat edges. Again, like I said, that's half of the battle of painting right there. All right, we're going to be working on our tints first. We'll start with white, and we'll add a little bit of blue each time to our white to get kind of back to that pure blue. And what you're going to want to try to do is have a nice transition from the white to the blue. There shouldn't be big leaps or big changes in those values, and none should be the exact same. So you just want a nice gradation from this white to that blue. All right. Let me go ahead and just clean my brush off. What I'm going to do is, since I have quite a bit of white right here in my palette, do I want to contaminate this whole thing with blue? Then I won't be able to use my shades, my tints with, shades with black. So what I want to do is just split this into two sections. Let's move a lot of, I should have done that to begin with. Let's move a lot of this white over here. I'll have some left over in case I make any mistakes, or maybe I darken my value too much. I won't have anything to come back and work with. We'll try to keep this as efficient as possible when we are doing this. Instead of having 20 values in our cup, we'll just keep adding to one. I'm going to clean my brush off again. All right, so what I'll do is go ahead and work with this lesser amount of paint. I can change it quickly if I have less paint versus a big giant amount. So keep that in mind. The other rule I want you to follow is when you are changing colors or making values is always add the darker value. In this case, we're going to be adding blue into our lighter value of white. If you're trying to add white into blue and get that to change, it's going to take a ton of white, right? It won't take very much blue to change that white to a darker value. So we'll do a little bit of at a time. And we just want a bit of an off blue right here. So I'm just gonna just barely dip my brush into the blue. Probably gonna need more than that, but let's just see what happens. And I'm going to mix that around so you can see very little change that. We want to be a little more aggressive with the amount we put in there though, because we got to make some big leaps from here to here. That's going to be kind of a lighter version of blue, not so much white. As you're going back and forth, be careful you don't contaminate, bring white into your blue, so you want to make sure you wipe off your brush frequently, clean out your water. My water's already starting to get pretty contaminated. And my brush is getting a lot of paint up into the upper part of the bristles. We want to try to avoid that. So keep those brushes really clean. And all right, I'm going to get a little bit more, double the amount that I did last time, and we'll see what that does. All right, that changed it quite substantially compared to the last time. I'm going to test this and see. It dries a little lighter than what you see in your cup. So be aware of that as well. So what I can do right now is I'm just going to take this and test it here. And that's what it's going to look like, a little bit lighter when it dries. So I think we're good to go. I'll go ahead and finish painting that out. And make sure you do a nice job of mixing that thoroughly. I didn't talk about the consistency of the paint. This should be kind of milky in consistency. And if you're mixing paint into different colors, you want to get all the streaks out, otherwise they're going to show up in your painting, which you might be able to see right there that I got a little streak there. So be careful of that. Now if you screw up on this stuff, after it dries, you can paint right over the top of it and fix things. So that's another cool thing about this paint. Okay, you can see when it dries, it's going to dry quite a bit lighter than that. So I probably could have been a little darker. We'll see what happens here. I'm going to go ahead and keep moving though up towards my blue. So I'm going to get another spot of blue and put it in here. Let me go ahead and clean out my brush again. Now, as you get closer and closer to blue, it's going to take a lot more blue to change that. So we want to get it pretty dark. So as you start mixing, double up the amount of stuff you mix into the next one so you can keep changing it more gradually. So I'm going to get that much this time and mix that in. Now what I want to be, since I'm halfway to my blue, is halfway there, and I'm not there yet. So this could have been the first color I put down. So I think what I'll do is I will go and fix that, and I can take this darker version and paint right over this one. So that is what I'm going to do right now. This is almost dry here. And even if it's wet still, it should blend in pretty good. Might have been better if I let it completely dry, but we're gonna push this along and you guys can experiment a little bit and see what happens. You learn a lot by just experimenting. All right, that darkened it up to where I want it to be. Now I want to get even more aggressive with this one. Clean off my brush. Add another big, pretty good lump of blue into that. All right, let's just go a little bit more aggressive. There you go. There's a big blob. Mix that up real good. Now when I get to here, this should be more blue than white, so I want to get really aggressive. I'm going to test this. It hasn't changed enough to be in between. So I want to go another big blob. And make sure you get all those streaks out of there. I know that's going to dry lighter. Is this about halfway in between? I think maybe another blob. And that should probably do the trick. Okay, I think I like that. And then the one in between can be probably one or two more big blobs in there. So I'm getting kind of a lot of paint in here, but I think if I just wipe it off really good, I can control the amount that's on the very edge. And we're gonna go with that. And mix that in with the blob I've already got on there. Make sure it's mixing in pretty well. Covering it up. All right, I'm pretty happy with that so far. And I'm gonna get pretty aggressive with adding quite a bit more. Again, I wanna get halfway between this one and that one. All right, I wiped off my brush pretty good. Now I want to take a probably big chunk of blue, get that in there. I might take another big chunk. It's going to take quite a bit to get that to change now because they're getting closer and closer together. But before I do that, I'll test it and just see. Yeah, we got a little ways to go there, so I'm gonna grab a little bit more blue. Stir it up really good. Forgot to clean off my brush. Notice I got some white in there. Probably not enough to do anything when I get to my tints, but just be careful you don't contaminate like I just did. So learn from my mistakes. I'm gonna wipe off my brush pretty good right here. And I'm gonna get another big chunk of blue in there. Let me clean that off. All right, here we go. Let's test that. I don't know if it's dark enough yet. It's really struggling to get even darker than that now. So what I can do to make things a little more simple for me is move some of this blue into here, so I have less paint to work with. And then I can take another scoop of my pure blue and put it in there, so it's like half and half, right? There we go. So, lesson learned. The less paint you have to deal with, the quicker your values are going to change. All right, I think I'm pretty good. Let me just test it here and see. I'm good with that. I think it's going to dry, not too light. Let me go ahead and paint that on there. Mix that in a bit. Yeah, that looks like it'll be about halfway between those two previous colors. Values, I should say. It's all the same color. All right. I'm going to finish this one up and pause it for a minute to regroup here. I'll clean out my water and my brush, and then I'll be working on my shade, which we only have one shade to do. It's just going to be a little bit of black mixed into your blue. It gets dark pretty quick there. Okay, and I'll show you what that looks like when it dries in a minute. Be right back. All right, everyone, I'm back. I have a clean brush, clean water, and I'm ready to do my shade of blue. So before I do that, so I want left over my pure colors. I want white, blue, and black left over after I do this. So if I contaminate this one, I'll have to get a new blue. So what I want to do, and I've got enough of it to do those other exercises we're going to be doing, I just want to split this into two sections. I'm going to put some blue over here. And it's not going to take much black to change this blue. So we'll just do a little tiny touch at a time and we'll test it. Make sure you're keeping your brush clean, not contaminated. And make sure you keep your other colors pure. I mean, don't get white mixed in with this, because then you're going to get a gray, and we don't want that. We want this to be just monochromatic blue. And so you got to keep your the grays out of it. All right, I'm going to take just a tiny touch of black. You can see I have barely a little bit on my brush, and I'll use this smaller section so it'll change it quicker. And it probably darkened it pretty good. Might be a little hard to tell on the video. When you guys do it in person, you'll see that black will change those colors very quickly. Very little bit will go a long way. All right, let's test that. That's quite a bit darker. Is it halfway between these two though? I'm not too sure. I can add just a touch more to be sure about that. And hopefully I didn't get it too dark. It's going to be a very midnight blue right there. Okay, let's get that on there. It's going to dry a little lighter. It looks pretty dark on the video, but it's a little lighter in person. What I can do is just grab a little bit more blue, make sure my brush is clean, and put it into that cup to dilute the black a little bit. Probably overdid it. So I'll just grab a little bit more blue and put it in there. Now again, I just added the lighter color to the darker one, so it's not going to change it very much. But just enough to make it just a touch lighter, and that's all I'm looking for on this. All right, I'm good to go with that. I'm just going to paint this whole thing out and let it dry. I don't have enough water on my brush. So the black that I am using, or the colors I'm using, are a little more watery. Your gouache that you'll be using might be a little more opaque. So mine might look a little more transparent than yours, I think. We'll see what happens when you guys send me yours. Maybe they'll be more transparent. Depends on the quality of the paint that we get, and we don't have the highest quality paint. But as you get more and more into painting, you'll want to start upgrading into those, more expensive paints, and they get really expensive. So just be aware of that. All right, again, this looks pretty dark on the video, but there is a difference, and you might see it when it dries. I'll finish painting this out, and then I'll pause it, let it dry. Having trouble getting that corner in there. Looks like I got a little flaw on my edge. I'll try to kind of clean that up a bit there. Okay, there's my value scale. I'll pause here, let it dry, and I'll build some of these areas to do the exercises in when I come back. All right, everyone, I'm back. My value scale has dried. Again, it's hard to see the difference between these two on the video. Let me zoom in closer so you can see. You can see that blue dot is more blue than black. It's in between those two. It's just hard to see when it's a little bit further away. All right, just try to have a nice craftsmanship on your edges, nice clean, crisp edges, and make sure your value scale gradually goes from white to blue, from blue